Alright my friends, I'm making another short quick video as filler because I actually am working on something quite big. So today, let's take a look at last week's Slopgate. It started off with this tweet. A surprising amount of replies talk about Mexican food, which is hilarious. We are so good at putting slop on a tortilla. What do you say about that, Frenchie? Is posting an L. Nobody outside the US or Mexico cares about Mexican food. You can add Canada to that, as much as we can be considered a different country than America, but you get the point. The reply came from this Bloomberg journal. The one thing that can unite America in this age of hyper-partisanship is dunking on bad food takes. And then my pal Sargon gave this counter-reply, which is what went viral. Mexican food is absolutely atrocious, though. The chilies are there to hide the taste of poor quality ingredients, not enhance the flavor. Listen, if you've been on Twitter for any length of time, you know that you can't be white, especially white British, and insult the food of any other culture. Whether you're objectively correct or not, it doesn't matter. A united army of white cosmopolitan hipsters and brown immigrants will come out of the woodwork to talk about how unspiced your food is. Of course, Sargon knew this would happen, which is why he immediately posted the image of a snuggling Homer Simpson with the caption, "Me posting an opinion like this just before I go to sleep." He fully expected to wake up with millions of people raging at him, which he did. He's probably remembering the seasoning police fiasco, where a bunch of brown people shat on a white woman for not seasoning her chicken, when she replied that she put fresh vegetables in the roasting pan instead of dry herbs. Dry garlic and celery powder and pepper flakes, they're all fine, but you can't beat actually putting garlic and celery and pepper in the dish. She then called everyone shitting on her the seasoning police, which black progressives on TikTok immediately took as a racial slur, and then white identitarians on Twitter immediately began using as a racial slur in reply. And the whole thing culminated with collages of black people washing their chicken with dish soap. But we've come back around to the spice conversation once again, and everyone replied to Sargon with the same tired, repeated insults. British plus bad food plus bad teeth plus white plus racist plus L plus ratio. Here's one reply that I think really exemplifies the whole thing. Tell me you've never had Mexican food without telling me you've never had Mexican food. Posted along with a picture of a pan filled with shrimp, lime wedges, avocado slices, a ton of onions and peppers and other spices, all laid out on a bed of fried sauced rice. Sargon called it an assault on the senses rather than a meal. When someone else chimed in with that common cope of British people conquered the whole world for spices, they never used any of them, Sargon replied with, surely this just shows we've recognized the corrupting nature of spices and decided on the path of virtue. Have you considered that your taste buds have been so debauched that they're unable to detect quality? The American's palate is so abused by the food of the foreigner that he can't distinguish flavors outside of an extreme range. It is either blisteringly spicy or mind-numbingly sweet. He is the victim of culinary Stockholm Syndrome. Now, these takes are absolutely written for maximum troll effect, but Sargon does genuinely feel this way. Let's go back to that dish with the shrimps and limes and avocado. To be honest, I'd probably eat this and enjoy it, but I wouldn't want to have it every day. Sargon's right in that if a meal is extremely spicy, or hell, just filled with a dozen different contrasting flavors, it does get to be a bit numbing. It's kind of like the culinary version of the Jack Murphy thing, where he advertised himself as pushing the edge of masculine sexuality, which is why he had to resort to riding dildos and ruining his asshole and pimping out his wife to other dudes in order to try and get off. There's a generalized lesson about vice here. If you pursue what's pleasurable too much, you become numb to it, and you have to go to even further extremes in order to satiate your appetites. This applies to sex, and it applies to food. By the way, I'm not some kind of wimp who can't handle spicy food myself. I enjoy spicy food, but I don't want to have it all the time. It's a nice treat once in a while, but you know what? I genuinely enjoy bland food just as much. Sometimes I'm actually just in the mood for toast with butter, or oatmeal, or plain old chicken noodle soup. Not everything has to be dipped in sweet chili heat Doritos powder or something. When you look at an English breakfast, yes, it's bland on the spice side, but it also looks really good. With the exception of the tomatoes, I don't really like tomatoes, I would eat everything here and enjoy it. I like my eggs and sausages with spices or sauces, but I also like them plain. Sometimes you actually want to taste the egg and the sausage, and not just the spice or the sauce, you know? Anyway, this whole thing went viral under the hashtag Slopgate, and now I have to explain to you the weird underlying meme. For a while now on 4chan, there's been a meme known as Goy Slop. Yes, it's anti-Semitic, but it's also funny as hell. The idea is, because the denizens of the pole board believe that the Jews control everything from the shadows, everything that is made for the common man to consume, whether that's food or entertainment or whatever, is goy slop. Slop refers to its low quality, and goy refers to goyim, a Hebrew word for a non-Jew. Of course, they believe that this makes the consumers of the goy slop easy to control by the secret Jewish conspiracy that runs the world from behind the scenes. It's obviously a stupid premise, but it's still really funny, and the term got picked up outside of 4chan as a more generalized descriptor of low-quality food. It still occasionally gets used in terms of movies or music or other pop culture things. For example, a recent variant is Todd Slop, referring to Todd Howard and the perceived low quality of Starfield, as well as the general Bethesda pattern of re-releasing the same game for the past 15 years. But for the most part, the goy slop meme now refers to exclusively low-quality food. Also, in a lot of more recent uses, the goy part has been dropped, rendering the meme just slop now. Partially because people who aren't anti-Semitic want to use a more sanitized version of the joke for fun, and partially because legitimate anti-Semites want to go stealth. So what actually is the slop that Sargon's referring to? Academic Agent made a tweet that seems to exemplify it. Left equals order, right equals chaos, Slopgate. The left picture is of a sliced roast. The right picture looks like a lasagna or a casserole, filled up to the brim with sauces and spices. Gonna be honest, they both look good to me. AA did the same thing as Sargon. He ramped the trolling up while still believing the underlying core message. The ingredients do not cohere. I can't even remember if it's chicken or pork. The beans are hard. Everything is leveled and undifferentiated. The spirit of the quesadilla is egalitarian and democratic, the melting pot made manifest. Okay, let me translate what's actually going on here. If you look at British food, or French or German, or even Japanese, you'll generally notice that the various foods in the meal are separate. If you want to have some of the meat on its own, or the vegetables, or the potatoes, or the bread, you can. If you want to mix them together and enjoy them in one bite, you can. But the point is that each dish is its own thing, and if it's done correctly, they're complementary. Compare that with Italian food, or Mexican food, or Indian food, where generally all of the various components of the meal are mixed together into one whole. The proteins, the carbs, the vegetables are all cooked together and turned into one mass. This is the slop. This type of cooking can be used to hide subpar ingredients by mixing them in with better stuff. Sauces and spices can also serve the same purpose. And historically, a lot of the cultures that produce slop food today in this way tended to overspice their meat regularly in order to try and prevent it from going bad, or so that they could stomach it if it actually was a little bit off. Now, there's some very good food that can come out of this culinary practice. Chinese and Vietnamese stir-fries are a great example of mixed mass food that is excellent. I'm also not saying that the British or the French or whoever else don't have their own slop foods as well. If lasagna is a slop food, and it most certainly is, then shepherd's pie is also a slop food, especially after you've had a couple of bites and the whole thing goops up. When Academic Agent says the spirit of the quesadilla is egalitarian and democratic, he's comparing the more classless society of the United States to the slop-like consistency of its food. Countries with more intact class systems like Britain, well, they have undemocratic food. Things aren't all mixed together, they're separate, each part of the meal representing a unique complementary tier. But American culture is fundamentally base, with no social classes, no nobility. All of its food is slop, all of its people are slop. At least this is his view. However, what he views as negative, Americans tend to view as positive. In the mid-20th century, a concept came about called democratic culture. This didn't refer to voting or governance, but rather the idea that America was somehow a better place because the common man and the elite man had the same practices and preferences, that American culture was more democratic and therefore more united. Now, this is at least somewhat true, and it is partially good. My video on meritocracy was all about how aligning the interests of the elites and the commoners through a shared culture is the best way to empower commoners. But this isn't universally good. The practices of the elites tend to have negative effects the commoners don't have the resources to manage, which is something I explained in my video on luxury beliefs. But nonetheless, having a more democratic culture is something Americans tend to pride themselves in, and that Europeans tend to look down upon Americans for. Moreover, at least some of Academic Agent's politics seems to be based in resentment of this Americanized democratic culture being imposed onto a more class-conscious Britain. This is why people of his political stripe were the first ones that I noticed to use terms like Lizzofication, to refer to this idea of American baseness versus European class, which I covered in my Lizzo video recently. Boy, I'm getting really good at those in-video advertisements, eh? What's really at the core of this is that a dumb food take went viral and people lost their minds yet again. Sargon very clearly prefers British food, and that's fine. For me personally, I like all of it. That's probably why I'm so fat. I can sit down and enjoy a roast with some vegetables and potatoes, or an English breakfast, or something like sushi, for example, all of these differentiated foods. I can also enjoy Mexican or Italian or Indian. I like spicy food, I like bland food, I like it all. My taste changes day to day. I'm not somebody whose face puckers the minute a bit of flavor is added, but I'm also not somebody who's burnt his tongue off so hard that a Carolina Reaper tastes like Novocaine. For me, the funniest thing about this is that it went viral at all. Imagine being so fucking weird and nosy that you have to police people for enjoying the food they like, even if you think that it's bland British food. Yeah, I know, Sargon kicked off Slopgate by insulting Mexican food first, but that's only after a decade or two of slop dominance on the internet. Listen, you know what? I'm coming out as a full food supremacist. We need to keep the different races of food separate. A different spot on the plate for every food. Close the borders, build the wall. Our precious white potatoes are going to turn into brown slop if we don't establish the edible no state. Yeah, that sounded better on paper.